Hello, I am Robert Ogilvy, Executive Strategist and EQ Coach. Glad you guys could join me today. Today's issue, what are the three secrets to boosting your motivation, your professional motivation? And really what it comes down to is what are the three major pieces that compose it? I know motivation might, culturally seem like an important thing, and it certainly underpins a lot of I would call it like hustle culture that's out there, which I would say tackles it in a very imbalanced, overly gritty way. Like you just need to be sort of, willful to get something done, but there's a lot more to it than that. And I would also say that there's a lot more long term that can be done than just, how willful you are in the moment. So let me break these down. So we'll just go over what we're going to talk about today. What are three major pieces that compose motivation? Well, this is your autonomy, your meaning. There's a bunch of other synonyms for that, but we'll just say that how much meaning you find in your work, and your mastery. Okay, so let's break down what these mean, why they're important, and all of that. Okay, first up, autonomy. Also freedom. Also, it's your impulse to want to self-actualize and try shit and do things. This stuff is critical for us. It makes it feel like we actually have some amount of choice and like we're personally opting to do this or that type of work. That means a lot. We know that even if we're in a difficult situation, simply knowing we have a choice, even a choice to quit, it amps up our ability to stick to and persevere about 5 times, right? So even I would say like the perception of choice or these subtle reminders of choice, it like really boosts our ability to actually dig in and create the results we want, which is fantastic. But at its best, it is that self-actualizing impulse. It's like I want to do things, I want to explore, I want to keep going. It's also a bit of the kind of maverick quality that a lot of very entrepreneurial folk would have, right? They have a high need for autonomy, they have a high need for freedom, is the way they would describe that in choice theory. High need for freedom, right? Um, so this is one very important thing to think about, and one reason I would say this is very important for you individually to consider is that um, so what is that? I guess there's a difference between optimizing in the moment in the situation you're in versus optimizing autonomy over time, right? In the moment, it's how many choices can I have and how good are those choices. But the long-term piece is how can I have better choices around me? How can I put myself in context where my freedom, where my autonomy, where my ability to self-actualize is actually going to be honored, right? And that is a very much a long-term strategic bet of like where are places where I could thrive, right? So that is one really critical piece. We first encounter this in the earlier part of our careers when we're going through schooling and education. We're trying to figure out what to focus on, as if we should all innately know what we give a damn about and what we want to self-actualize towards. So that impulse becomes important here. So that actually naturally leads us to the second point, which is how meaningful do you find your work, or to maybe be more specific on other parameters, how consequential and like real, useful, legitimate, or at high level we might even use terms like how impactful, how like useful or even transformative is our work, right? That really gets us going. That's also actually a critical piece when we're working in teams, right? No one wants to do disposable throwaway work, but it also has to do on a kind of team or larger org context that we can see that what we do is a part of something larger. One of the gaps, as we this is almost capitalist specialization, labor specialization at its worst, right? I think Alain Baldwin has a talk where he mentions this. He says something like, it's great to be, oh, what do you do? What cool, heroic, amazing, creative thing do you do? And it's like, oh, well, I'm a specialized supply chain analyst in Southeast Asia or something like that. And it might be really useful, but it's so disconnected from doing anything, and on a day-to-day level, it actually becomes really hard to tap into, in EQ terms, what we would call noble purpose, right? Because that's part of what's going on here. You want to be doing on an operational team level work that is useful, but big picture that actually starts to like, oh, wait a minute, there's a big impact at play here. I want to be part of something which is actually transformed over time, or even after you pass on, there's some sort of legacy, there's some sort of useful transformation. That's beautiful. That actually really motivates us quite a bit. I would say if there's any kind of common motivational issue of professionals, is that their meaning they find in their work is so low. They might be sharp, trained, capable people that know how to do high quality work, but the amount of meaning they draw from their work is critically low. And you've heard me rail on this before. it's like particularly I would say rote STEM professionals, they tend to work in professional services and to kind of in a mid to low end kind of rote sense, right? And doing that thing again and again and again. Yeah, it's often not very engaging. Why am I doing this, right? So these are big important questions to be asking yourself. There's no easy answers here, but back to the team end of things, part of this is around the kind of work you want to take on, right? And this is also another impulse why a lot of us are going towards self-employment, because if we have a lot more control over what kind of work we're taking on and where we're finding meaning, like yeah, that's the flavor of life. That's the flavor of suffering that we want to go after. Like that makes sense for us, right? That's an easy thing to optimize. I think a lot of us now are realizing that we'd rather kind of earn less or have to kind of sing for our own dinner, but have a lot more meaning and freedom in our work than whatever alternatives we were dealing with before, right? And that's beautiful. I actually think that's one of the beautiful things coming out of the great reset that this pandemic is causing. Anyway, enough on that for now. Last point, mastery. So there's a lot to be said around mastery and long-term learning and development, and particularly for the executive folks that I deal with, this is important for them because they do really need to have top-tier skills and become like really fast at their decision making, really good at spotting patterns, really good at seeing how systems are working, and that requires basically a lot of very developmental models, a lot of experience, and a generalist par excellence to do that, right? But mastery in its simplest sense, you might think of is that I have certain skills and strengths and abilities, and how well am I using those strengths and abilities, and then long term that becomes how well am I developing them, right? One common, it's almost a cultural heuristic at this point, is the kind of 10,000 hours of practice kind of outliers thing, right? It takes that long to get there. I mean, the whole reason even in professional designations that they even have, you need 4,000 or 5,000 or however many hours to do something, is to say, it's like, listen, we can't actually, pre-plan and predict what every sort of project or the nature of everyone's work is going to look like, right? But we know that if you have that much effort and mastery put into it, you're probably pretty good at your craft, right? Now this is another good point that I'll remind you that remember that in the early and mid part of your performance in something, more experience doing that will make you better, and then that tapers off, and then what starts to kick up is more of the reflexivity, more about you thinking well, thinking through problems well, and the better feedback, the better self-awareness of what isn't working. And that's really the long-term gem, right? So the difference of being a good professional and a great, or really I would say a masterful, creative, and innovative professional is that they have all the experience and the reflexivity is amped way up, right? And it doesn't take long to talk to someone to get a sense of how fluently they can deal with these ideas and whatever their craft, whatever their profession may be, right? And what's great about that, back to the motivation side of it, is that if you found something that you're a master at, it's exciting to you, right? Like if you go to someone who is some advanced musician who's done that for decades, right? When you talk to them about their music or their instrument or what's going on, they're excited. There are all these layers of subtlety and depth of details that they notice that the noobs, the laymen don't notice, but not just they do, but they're really excited about it. And they ask, they might ask you crunchy questions. You might just think, oh, well, I never would have thought of that. Or it might be so over your head and bewildering it to like, what the hell is that person talking about? So I have been known to nerd out in those ways sometimes myself. But really, that's a reflection of they have very developmental models in that realm, which, again, when they're performing at that level in that domain, it helps them do better, right? And again, it amps up their motivation, right? Um, so anyway, let's just recap. Uh, Motivation, professional motivation, is super important for us to be happy, to be successful, to be driven at what we're doing. When we combine motivation with teamwork, that's stuff that actually relates to good customer satisfaction, that the people we're dealing with for adding value are happy. And we deal with motivation and issues around strategy and change. That's actually what allows us to actually be sustainable long term, to actually keep renewing organizationally whatever the hell is we're doing and how we're adding value. So like motivation applies in so many parts of our work. Critical stuff. What are the three big pieces of motivation? Your autonomy, your meaning, how consequential and useful and impactful your work is, and your mastery. This stuff is important for everyone. So take your own gut check of where you're at, see what you can do to improve, and I hope it keeps getting better and better. All right, I'm Robert Ogilvy, Executive Strategist and EQ Coach. Love you guys. Hope to see you again next time.